Yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. Tom Toro, from a comic published in the New York Times. The cheapest commodity on Earth today is human flesh and blood. To make a profit at the expense of human life is the central controlling motive of the capitalist system. Eugene V. Debs. In the dawn of days, the Earth Mother Gaia chose her favored warriors and set them to her defense. They were shapeshifters, able to wear the skin of men, wolves, and of things that were some of both. They were guardians and protectors, but then the world fell out of balance. The worm, which represented the necessary destruction and the eventual end all things must face, was driven to madness. The worm began to infect everything it touched, corrupting powerful spirits, mutating the living world, and sending virulent poison coursing through the hearts of men. The Garou, along with their many allies, have fought the servants of the worm across the centuries. There have been victories, many of which are still remembered in the stories and songs of the tribes, but they have been few. And even in victory, there is always a seed of corruption. A doubt placed in the heart of an elder that robs them of their conviction. A noble sacrifice of someone who can never be replaced. A madness that leaves a warrior too quick to reach for their rage, realizing too late that the fresh blood on their hands is from their family and friends, rather than the enemies they slew so long ago. And even as the bloodlines of the Garou nation were weakened by infighting, infertility, and their endless war of attrition with the worm and its servants, they faced a new foe. A foe that possessed a cunning and a cruelty unlike anything they had ever faced before, and which had infested the world around them so subtly that they hadn't noticed until it already had its tendrils at their throats. That foe was capitalism. To understand Pentex, first we have to understand the tabletop RPG Werewolf the Apocalypse. Werewolf's first edition was released in 1992, and it was the second RPG by White Wolf that took place in the modern horror setting of the World of Darkness. Werewolf followed the extremely popular Vampire the Masquerade, and it built off many of the horrors and threats laid down by its predecessor, while expanding the world they shared. In this game, players took on the roles of werewolves, who were attempting to fight against the physical and spiritual corruption of the world in order to prevent the apocalypse from happening. The war had been going on for centuries, though, and it seemed that no matter how many times they defeated the worm and its servants, it always found new allies and new ways to wriggle back into the world to start tainting it once more. To the Garou, who sought to balance the physical and spiritual, humanity's rampant consumption and abuse of the planet was a literal, existential threat that was spawning monsters and empowering their ultimate foe. So while these werewolves would claim they were merely fulfilling their duty to protect the planet, their campaigns often boiled down to supernaturally executed acts of eco-terrorism. The setup naturally put the Garou in direct conflict with capitalism. From sweatshop labor that broke people's spirits and sickened their souls, to slash and burn operations that destroyed priceless tracts of rainforest while releasing ancient banes from captivity, for anyone who wanted an even higher stakes version of the film Fern Gully, to modern cruelties like the private prison industry and all the abuses of human rights that happen in it, the plotlines practically write themselves. And for all their physical prowess and supernatural might, werewolves can't simply stab capitalism to death. They might be able to sabotage a worksite, assassinate a CEO, or even provide evidence to authorities to get corrupt operations shut down, but that power vacuum will simply be filled by another LLC the very next day, looking to pick up where the last one was stopped. This is where Pentex comes into the picture. According to the lore, Pentex was first birthed in the Texas oil fields in the 1860s during the early days of the petroleum boom. The company, originally referred to as Premium Oil, was run by a miserable bastard named Jeremiah Lassiter. A cruel, greedy, capricious man, he fell into a tunnel collapse and found himself in a battle with an ancient spirit. The thing could easily have killed him, but Lassiter's will was too great for it to take control of him. So, being a businessman, he made a bargain with the potent, corrupt spirit. It could work through him to shape his company and the effect that company would have on the world. The Bane accepted this devil's bargain, and it and Lassiter proceeded to brutalize, swindle, and devour anything they could in order to increase the size of their holdings. Even when Lassiter died in the early 1900s, the spirit's hold on the company, which had grown hugely successful in just a few short decades, didn't slacken. The company did, however, fall into the hands of 5 directors, most, if not all, of whom had some kind of dealings with the worm or its allies. One did not achieve that level of wealth and privilege without getting a little blood on their hands and burying a few bodies. As the years progressed, the company that was Premium Oil grew even larger, gaining subsidiaries and shell corporations around the world and acquiring controlling interest in things it didn't technically own on paper. It also gained more and darker supernatural allies. The organization regularly fields the corrupt and insane werewolves who serve the worm, known as Black Spiral Dancers. There are many vampires who either act as directors or who share direct interests with the board, and it has even touched the mages of the technocracy. Pentex has, in other words, become one of the major threats in the world of darkness. Despite the singular name, however, Pentex is not a singular entity. It does not have a single corporate HQ. It doesn't appear on the market under a single stock ticker. Pentex is a multi-headed hydra whose interests can be found in everything from fossil fuels and slumlord housing to bleeding-edge tech research and medical facilities of all stripes. It's built of shell companies, subsidiaries, handshake agreements, backroom deals, politics, and blood pacts. And those things are difficult to destroy, even for the most dedicated of opponents. It is better to be feared than loved. Niccolo Machiavelli in The Prince. The things that you do are completely ungood. Yeah, but if I didn't do them, then someone else would. The Onceler, from Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. As an antagonist, Pentex falls into what I call the ever-present threat. While there are clear and present dangers that can be fought against, there is no single event that could kill Pentex as a threat in the setting. Even if the players somehow managed to kill one of the 5 directors, the remaining 4 would simply appoint a successor. And it's possible there are already protocols in place that if all of the existing directors meet their end, then their positions will immediately be taken over by subordinates who are waiting in the wings. Eliminating the threat of a massive, globe-spanning collection of greedy corporatists backed by vampires, corrupt werewolves, and insane mages that is infiltrated into multiple layers of various governments is a threat on the level of something like James Bond's Spectre or G.I. Joe's Cobra. At the same time, Pentex can still be fought against, and it's possible for player characters to have victories. Characters could conduct nighttime raids and run a shadow war of espionage and sabotage, doing everything from infecting a tech company's networks with horrifying viruses that destroy everything in the servers, to blowing up pieces of mining equipment that were going to be used to exploit natural resources in a way that would harm, or worse, corrupt, the spirits of an untouched nature preserve. Players can use the stock market and the tools of the economy against Pentex's subsidiaries, trying to beat them at their own game by acquiring land and rights to certain properties, or even using the legal system to tie them up in red tape where they can't hurt anyone. And while those little victories might seem insignificant, they will add up over time as players make more progress and attempt to gain ground. With all of that said, Pentex also offers one more very important aspect which shouldn't be overlooked by storytellers: the ability to create an organic domino effect due to player choices. Consider the mining operation mentioned above. Even if it's being done for corrupt reasons, and everyone acknowledges it should be stopped, that doesn't end the plot. Even if the werewolves at your table blow up the equipment, cause a landslide, and so on to make the project untenable, what happens to all the workers who just got laid off? With no paychecks and their livelihoods thrown into jeopardy, that adds to the misery and hopelessness of the community, which could lead to the corruption of the area, rendering the werewolves' victory a hollow one. If things get bad enough, people may even mutate into Fomori as the unfeeling rage, hatred, and emptiness invades their spirits and allows the worm inside of them, turning them into horrifying monsters. And if your pack wasn't careful with their assaults, if they chose to just kill the miners, the foremen, and security guards and others to shut this operation down, what does that do to their own souls? Because while there are people who do Pentex's dirty work who've seen behind the curtain and know exactly what's going on, a majority of people haven't. They're just working stiffs who are trying to earn enough to survive in this harsh world. They've got bills to pay, kids to feed, older family members to take care of. The Garou can't just rip apart Pentex's operation and then leave all those innocents in the lurch, or those people they saved might become something far worse down the line. There are a lot of moving parts to Pentex as an antagonist, and the situations can be as multifaceted as you want them to be. So while in some cases you might want to provide a simple, straightforward goal for your players, like assaulting a Black Book's lab where illegal genetic experimentation is being done on captured werewolves, in others you might want to present your players with a moral Gordian knot where it feels like there is no good choice to make, only a range of shades of gray to pick from. If you're starting to get a feeling that I like Pentex as an antagonist, as a plot, and as a villain, you're definitely right on the money. Because while the war with the worm speaks to the spirit of the Garou, the war against Pentex speaks to the anti-capitalist and environmentalist angles that were some of the more unique, positive, and in-your-face parts of Werewolf the Apocalypse as a game. However, Pentex isn't perfect. It has a big, glaring flaw that has stuck in my craw for years, and it's something I feel I finally have a solution to. But before we get to that part of the video, first, a word from our partners over at Dubby, an energy drink company who is, let me assure you, not a Pentex subsidiary.
Are you tired of not having the energy you need to get to the end of your to-do list every day? Are you sick of store-bought energy drinks that fizzle out like wet bottle rockets when you really need a pick-me-up? Has coffee become that unreliable friend that promises to help out, but never even gets off the couch? Do you wish there was a better way for you to reclaim that get-up-and-go you used to have? Well, now there is. Dubby. What is Dubby, you ask? It's a modern solution to your energy needs. A can of great tasting powder, all you do is add a scoop to your water bottle, run the tap, shake it up, and boom, you are ready to go. It goes down smooth, you can tailor the kick to your needs, and it has no sugar and no artificial colors or dyes. It's got dozens of unique flavors with more coming out all the time, and the coffee cherry extract is that central ingredient of Dubby's power matrix that means you are filling yourself up with clean energy that will focus your mind and which won't leave you sputtering and crashing the second you finish your last sip. Think your tasks are too big for Dubby? Think our drink can't handle it? Well, you've got another thing coming. Dubby is ideal for late night study sessions, getting ready for your early morning shift, keeping up with your kids when they're on a sugar high, stakeouts on the shady side of town, early morning interrogations on hard-to-crack suspects, sharpening your reflexes before a no-knock raid, dealing with the crushing banality of a world that doesn't respect your wild soul, maintaining focus as you remake reality to your whims and struggle with the eldritch things from beyond the veil of time, finishing that last pile of laundry, and many more. So what are you waiting for? Life is short, and when it comes at you fast, make sure you have a slug of W in you so that you can roll with the punches. Not only that, but if you follow the link in the video description below or use the code LITERARYMERCENARY at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your order. Again, that code is LITERARYMERCENARY, all one word, all capitalized, to get a full 10% off your order. Don't hesitate, supplies are always in flux, so go grab your can before it's gone. W is not responsible for any bizarre reactions, strange mutations, or soul corruptions that come as a response to their product. Follow the recommended dose when using W products to avoid any Class 1 through Class 4 body horror situations. W is an independent company, is not a subsidiary or partner of Pentex or any of its shell corporations, nor was it developed with the aid, backing, or consent of members of the technocracy. While previous portions of the disclaimer are meant in jest, W is a real product and the discount code offered above is completely valid. All purchases directly support the creator of this video. Lastly, if you are looking for Pentex-related tabletop RPG supplements, follow the link in the description below.
As I mentioned previously, Pentex is a wonderfully dark antagonist, and in many ways it is a perfect foil to the beliefs and mission of the Garou. It represents everything that is evil and unsustainable about a culture and an economic system driven to consume everything and to exploit every person and power structure it can in that process. Not only that, it is a clear and present danger that no single slash of claw or pull of a trigger can defeat. However, when I started researching Pentex for my supplement, Evil Incorporated, which provides a list of 10 Pentex subsidiaries, link in the description below, I was genuinely shocked that it was such a new antagonist to the setting. And something about that just felt wrong, both in a historical sense, but also in terms of the World of Darkness's own internal consistency. Right off the bat, I am not saying that the Texas oil boom wasn't ground zero for an environmental crisis. At the time it happened, there was a big debate as to whether vehicles were going to be gas-powered or electric-powered, and battery-operated vehicles were quite common. The discovery of oil in Texas plummeted gas prices, making the internal combustion engine the clear choice in the debate, and laying the groundwork for huge parts of the current carbon crisis we now face. However, the timeline of the World of Darkness goes all the way back to the murder of Abel by the hand of Cain, and it just didn't feel right to have such a big, dangerous antagonist, which was ostensibly being driven by an ancient corrupted spirit intent on laying waste to the world, jump in barely a handful of generations ago from the time of Werewolf's release. Now, this might be an American problem. To paraphrase an author who was talking about cosmic horror, in England, 100 miles is a long distance, and in America, 100 years is a long time. And given that Werewolf's initial audience was largely American, the idea that Pentex had been a threat since 1865 probably felt like a long time ago. That's just after the Civil War and the end of the Old West era, after all. To us, it does seem like the distant past. For some context, the East India Trading Company was founded in the year 1600, and it wasn't even dissolved until 1875. A full 10 years after the events that put the faction that would become Pentex in play. The transatlantic slave trade was started in the 1400s, and that was just one example of the heinous exploitation taking place in international relations. Mercantilism, the precursor to capitalism, first became popular in the 1400s as well. Before that, there are tales of merchant princes and dynastic empires built on piracy and trade, going all the way back through human history. Now, while those older points on the timeline might not have the same level of environmental impact that the burgeoning fossil fuel industry was having on the planet, Pentex is clearly supposed to be doing the work of the worm, and the easiest way to open the door for its corruption is through suffering and misery. This is something all of these examples, and countless others, would have produced in great measure. It just feels off for one of the greatest champions of the worm to have only risen to power and prominence so recently in the timeline. But I've put a lot of thought into this, and I think I have an answer that might solve this very personal complaint. At its best, Pentex represents the idea that there will always be some people willing to commit atrocities for material gain. Adding the drop of an evil spirit possessing one of the empty suits on the board of directors, and the fact that literal blood-sucking monsters help make their decisions, almost feels like gilding the lily. However, none of the changes I would suggest to Pentex take place after its inception. In fact, I would say that, as it stands, it's fine and dandy. No. What I would suggest is adding to the history of what led up to Pentex. Because the idea of a mortal being possessed by a great spirit of the worm, doing the bidding of dark forces in exchange for personal wealth and power, makes for a great werewolf antagonist. Especially if that mortal host is possessed of enough will and cunning that they are able to maintain their own autonomy and personality while still drawing on this deep well of corrupt energies to give them an edge over the heroes. However, the question remains, who would that person be? Where and when in the world would we find them? Should they be one of the captains of the East India Trading Company who found something terrible in the Congo? Or perhaps a privateer who found a dark spirit in the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy? Should it be one of the traffickers who sold humans for a profit? One of the early mercantile lords who fought bloody wars and sent others to die so he could strip away the absolute and divine right of kings? A feared Norseman who would steal anything not nailed down and kill anyone who got in his way? No. For this, we must turn back the clock even further. We must go back before the White Howlers fell to the worm and danced the Black Spiral. We must go back before the rise of Rome, before the wars and conquests of Alexander the Great, and even before the period we now refer to as Ancient Greece. We need to go all the way back to the year 1750 BCE to the city of Ur. We need to find a man who is an innovator in the art of business, and who just might be the one to carry the fate of the world of darkness upon his back. The father of Pentex, the mouth of the defiler worm, and one of the great hidden antagonists of the entire setting who may be responsible for leading the world to the edge of the apocalypse and possibly pulling it back from the brink, is none other than Ea-nasir. But who is Ea-nasir, you ask? Ea-nasir was a merchant active in Mesopotamia in the year 1750 BCE, and we know this because there is a clay tablet written in Akkadian cuneiform complaining about the copper he was selling. This tablet was sent to the city of Ur as a complaint, and it was written by his customer Nani, claiming that Ea-nasir had been paid for a high quality of copper ingot, and he provided lower quality ingots, which Nani refused. Ea-nasir had not returned the money paid to him, nor provided the goods originally agreed upon, hence the legal complaint. And apparently this was not the only time in the ancient record that Ea-nasir is mentioned, so it seems his bad business practices had made him at least a little infamous. But how does a grifter from the days of ancient Mesopotamia survive to the modern day? Well, the world of darkness is full of methods that can extend one's lifespan. From acting as an independent ghoul and achieving immortality through the vitae of the children of Cain, to rare spells and relics crafted by mages, to literal deals with demons, this version of Ea-nasir should have had dealings with all the different spheres of the game. A man who will go anywhere and promise anything in pursuit of profit and longevity, he might have been quietly involved in all kinds of historical endeavors. Was Ea-nasir present during the pilgrimage of Mansa Musa, and did his advice help the king of Mali wreck the economy of Egypt and its trading partners so Ea-nasir could pocket as much wealth as he could in the crash? Was he one of the people who engineered the grift in and around Rome's Colosseum, managing to escape with decades of wealth as the city burned down around his ears? Perhaps he escaped to the fringes of the empire, and it was there he came across the recently fallen White Howlers, who had become the Black Spiral Dancers. And perhaps it was there, in the mud and the blood of the North, that he made a bargain with one of the greatest and deadliest forces of all, becoming a representative of one of the three heads of the Triadic Worm. While the Beast of War represents violence and destruction, and the Eater of Souls represents greed, lust, and gluttony, the Defiler Worm is a scheming entity of corruption that pollutes everything it touches. It is the serpent in the grass, the smooth liar, the sower of discontent, and the thief who steals value to leave in its place leaden misery that poisons all it touches. Using Ea-nasir expands the history of Pentex into a legacy, which helps give it the weight and momentum of a longer-term enemy, especially if a storyteller wants to fill in the gaps with some previous deeds of this potent agent of the worm. For example, was Ea-nasir one of the voices who pushed the Magna Carta, both because it would be good for his business interests, but also because it damaged the power of the Silverfangs and their royal allies? Did he instigate and fund French revolutionaries for the same reason, knowing the overthrow of the government would send ripples throughout Europe and destabilize an entire tribe of the Garu, as well as killing who knows how many of their kinfolk? Did he bolster the Bolsheviks as well, hoping to continue that damage? Was Ea-nasir partially responsible for launching Spanish ships to Central America, and for land grabs and mining rights being snatched up in North America? And if he was told about the bindings of the Great Banes in the Americas, the Banes which belong to another of the worm's three heads, would he want to find them and keep them in his back pocket as a weapon to be unleashed when necessary? When we bring Ea-nasir, the Defiler Worm, the Black Spiral Dancers, and the discovery of a Great Bane in the Texas oil fields together, we now have a new link in a much longer chain of events. This gives us an additional antagonist, or antagonists, since Ea-nasir would likely have formed cabals, cults, secret societies, and other similar organizations to attempt to protect his identity over the many centuries, to add into the formation of Pentex as a company. Because even if Ea-nasir, or whatever name he's going by in the late 1800s, wasn't on the board of Premium Oil, it's likely he would have seen what was happening and used his resources and cunning to become a major investor. And while it would be easy to say that he is one of the secret faces that make up the board of directors, I would actually advise against that for a very important reason. Ea-nasir, as a character, should not be so straightforward. The Defiler Worm is a tricksy force, and anyone it would choose to act as its representative will always have plans and motivations of their own. And anyone strong enough to maintain their own will while tapping into its power is someone who is not to be taken lightly. So one day, he might back a new corporation breaking ground, then the next day hire saboteurs to blow up that facility purely to humiliate a rival and to lessen their standing with the board. He might attempt to corrupt or destroy a cairn, or plot the death of an elder werewolf, and the very next day offer assistance to help defend another cairn because its continued existence serves his interests. Does he do these things because he does not want either of the other two heads of the worm to be the one who declares victory? Does he do it because he simply loves playing the game of diplomacy and economy too much to let it end? Or Is there a small part of Ea-nasir that remembers what it was to be a man, with the wind in his hair and the sun on his face, and he is trying desperately to buy time for someone to wholly prevent the apocalypse from happening? All of these things could simultaneously be true. But just how Cain, the father of vampires, is currently driving a cab in New York City and keeping his nose out of the affairs of the rest of the world of darkness, so Ea-nasir would be best served in a role that is powerful but faceless. A secretary to the board of directors, perhaps, who can manipulate them with information and reports that are just accurate enough that they take the actions he wants them to take. He might be a powerful investor, a voice who speaks on behalf of the Black Spiral dancers, someone who commands the loyalty of a cabal of ghouls. Or he might even be all of these things at once, with his fingers in a dozen different pies. Just like how Pentex can shift and change to take on any of 100 different roles and shapes as your chronicle needs it to, so too could this antagonist wear any of 1,000 different faces, all of which might contain some fraction of the truth. Let the buyer beware, though, because Ea-nasir might promise you gold and leave you with lead ingots beneath a gaudy coat of paint and a slip of paper that simply says, "No refunds." Thanks for staying to the end of this little video essay of mine. This is the second one of these that I have done for the World of Darkness, and if folks would like to see more installments like this, then please leave your suggestions for future topics in the comments below. Both my publisher and myself will be reading them, looking for future ideas. And if you are looking for additional supplements to help you realize Pentex as an antagonist in your game, consider picking up a copy of Evil Incorporated, 10 Pentex subsidiaries, linked in the video description below. Also, don't forget to check out Dubby, because while the commercial might have been a little bit on the silly side, the product is very real and the discount code given does actually work. And before you go, please like the video, share it around on your own social media channels, subscribe, and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss what comes next.